Good evening, everybody, and welcome back. It's been a long time. It's been over a month. We were supposed to start last week, but after I came back from vacation, I got a bad stomach flu and I couldn't teach last week. So we're here, finally back. And this week we're going to learn something that if you're familiar with Chassidic psychology is one of the staples of the whole way of looking at the Torah's text in a way that's deciphered psychologically. And specifically, we're going to look at the mitzvah called Shiluach Haken. Shiluach Haken means sending the mother bird away. Literally means sending the nest away, or emptying the nest. And the idea behind this mitzvah is quite complex. It's hard to wrap our heads around it. But basically it means that if you happen to chance upon a nest of a kosher bird, and the nest has chicks or eggs in it, then you're not allowed to take the chicks or the eggs as long as the mother bird is still nesting. So what you have to do is you have to send the mother bird away. You have to force her to leave the nest. And once she's left the nest, then you're allowed to take the eggs or the chicks. The reason behind this apparently would be tzar balei chaim, what we call having compassion for animals. Then even though we're permitted to eat these eggs or these chicks, it's not proper to do so when the mother bird is still there, when she's still nesting. Because it adds an element of grief that she sees that her chicks, her offspring, have been taken from her. It's very interesting to see that a lot of attempts to find environmental issues in Torah are connected with this particular mitzvah. One of the reasons it's given for it is that we're not allowed to cause a species to go extinct. It's very interesting. This is one of the... It's not a very common commentary, but it's one of the main commentaries that says this. And by taking both the mother and the eggs at the same time, you're causing, as it were, at least a minor event of extinction. That if you would only take the chicks, so the mother could have other offspring and the species would be propagated. And if you would only take the mother, then obviously the chicks could grow up, the eggs could perhaps hatch, and they could propagate the species. So there's a lot of interesting things about this. But it becomes a little bit more complex when you consider the fact that this is not a case of if you like to have the chicks or the eggs, then you need to scare the mother bird away. It's actually a positive commandment, which means that if you happen to chance upon a nest like this, then you have an injunction. You're compelled to actually make the mother bird go away. But then there's a whole question about, do you have to actually take the chicks or not? So there are different opinions about that. It could be that if you don't need the chicks, you don't have to take them. So all you need to do is to cause the mother bird to fly away. What would be the rationale behind that? The Zohar says that the mother bird and the chicks represent the congregation of Israel and the Jewish souls. And when you cause the mother bird to fly away, she cries out to God, saying, "Have mercy on my children." And so that symbolically, it's as if the congregation of Israel, meaning the source of all the souls of the Jewish people, is crying out to God over the dispersion, over the exile, and is calling out to him, save my children. So that's the way the Zohar explains it, and that would be some kind of rationale for why you would have to, in any case, make the mother bird flee the nest. So there's a lot more to discuss about this. In Israel, it's very common. I don't know how common it is in America, but in Israel, it's very common to find nests in one's house, because there's a lot of pigeons, and they usually build their nests in people's balconies, where on the one hand they're protected from cats or other predators, like there's a lot of crows in Israel, and on the other hand they're out of reach of humans. So there's a whole question about these types of nests, and if you get them, then become a real nuisance, because they always come back every year, year after year, and they can do it 2-3 times every year. And once the chicks hatch, it's a real mess. I mean, it becomes a real mess. So most people don't want these nests in their balconies, and so there's a lot of rulings that you could actually perform this mitzvah even with a nest that's on your own property, because the normal way that this is supposed to be conducted is when you come upon a nest in the wild, not a nest that belongs to you. But since there's this situation where you don't really want the nest in your balcony, so there's a lot of rulings, halachic authorities that say that you can even perform this mitzvah with a nest in your balcony. We have a balcony like this, and every year, until this year, we got at least 2 or 3 nests, and so we have a big jar with a lot of eggs. People say that they're a segula for something or something else. In any case, we keep them somewhere. This year, we finally put up netting so that the pigeons can get in. So that, I think, solved the problem for good. Okay, so that's a little bit about the mitzvah itself. And what I want to do is I want to read the verses themselves and then start looking at how this is interpreted in Chassidic psychology. So I'm going to share the screen here. Let me see that I have it. Yes, I do. Okay. So the verse says like this: if along the road you chance upon a bird's nest in any tree or on the ground with fledglings or eggs, and the mother sitting over the fledglings or on the eggs, do not take the mother together with her young. Let the mother go, and we'll see that we have to translate this a little bit better. This is not a very good translation. And take only the young, in order that you may fare well and have a long life. Okay, let's stop the this share, and let's see what was written about this in Chassidus. So I'm going to share a different screen now. Okay, here we go. So this is from 1812. It's a small piece that appears at the end of a book called Derech Mitzvotecha, which is the third Rebbe of Chabad, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's a compilation of his teachings on the different commandments. And in principle, he goes according to the order of the Torah. And in our Parashah, there's an addendum at the end that is not from Tzemach Tzedek himself. It's not from the third Lubavitcher Rebbe himself. It seems to be an innovation from a regular chassid, who was obviously very learned, but it's not something from the Rebbe. And it says like this: in the name of Rabbi Mendel Borer, of blessed memory. So that was his name, Mendel Borer. his custom was not to say words of Torah unless it was a place where he had received a contribution. In other words, if he was in some town and they asked him, they knew he was a scholar, and they would tell him, look, we want you to give a class, we want you to do this, we want you to do that, we want you to preach. So he wouldn't teach unless they had paid him. Very interesting custom. And he based his custom on the verse. Now, this is the more exact translation of the verse we just read. Release, you shall release, the mother and the sons you shall take for yourself. So he took this verse, the second verse of the commandment that we just looked at, and he said, from this second verse, which more exactly should be translated as release, you shall release, shaleach teshalach, the mother, meaning you should make her fly away. You shall make her fly away. It repeats it twice. And the sons, meaning the chicks or the eggs, you shall take for yourself. So this is his explanation. Meaning, Torah and mitzvos are called sons. We're now deciphering the symbology in this commandment. Of course, there's the commandment. The commandment literally is what it is. But when we come to look at the psychological dimension of Torah, we have to decipher the symbols. We have to decipher what they stand for. So, the sons are the Torah and mitzvos, meaning the chicks or the eggs are Torah or mitzvos that a person does. While the mother is a connotation for the reason or the cause, which brings about the Torah or mitzvos. So, what does this mean? It means that this is not such an esoteric mitzvah, it's not such an esoteric story, if you decipher it as meaning that we're talking about every time that we come to do a mitzvah. And we consider what is the reason for doing what we did. A person wakes up in the morning and he goes to shul. He has to ask himself, what is the reason that I'm going to shul? I'm going to give a common example, but I'm going to beat it to death eventually, but, bear with me. And somebody, it's Sunday morning and he doesn't really want to get up, but he knows that right after davening, there's a class, and in between davening and the class, and during the class, they serve lox and bagels, and it's a whole thing. And so he gets up, and he says, if it would only be that I would go to learn for learning's sake, I would go to daven, to pray only for prayer's sake, I wouldn't go. But now that they're serving lox and cream cheese, I'm interested. I'm in. So the cause is the food being served. And the Torah and the mitzvah that he's getting is the prayer and the study group afterwards. So says Reb Mendel Borer, that's what's going on. That is the mother and the sons. The mother is the cause for the good deed that I did. And the sons are the reward, meaning the effect. What did I get from the cause? Now he says something amazing. A It's not so amazing if you learn a lot, but if you've never heard this before, it's really eye-opening. What does the temple change in our reality? A lot of people will think that the temple is just some place where there's some kind of service that goes on with sacrifices and singing and this and that. But the temple changes consciousness. If you're following the morning classes every morning on Facebook or later on YouTube, then this week we're dealing with one of the main differences in consciousness that happened once the temple was destroyed. And now he says like this, in the time of the temple, the reason, meaning the mother, clearly came from above. What does that mean? It means that when a person went to perform a commandment, a mitzvah, when he went to learn from someone, the reason for his going clearly came from above. What does it mean that it came from above? That you felt that God was guiding you. You didn't have to make believe. You didn't have to try to analyze the situation deeply. It was very clear to you that the reason that you're going is because God wants you to go. You felt it in your bones. It was clear. The causes for what people do were clear. Now, this is so distant, I think, from most people that it really needs some explanation. Most of us, at least until we're 40 or 50, think that we are doing things in our lives because they make sense. But the older you get, I think the more you realize that we're not masters of our own destiny. And that there are many, many things that we do in life because life sort of pushes us in that direction. Not because we really decided to do it. There's many things affecting our actions. A lot of times a person finds himself somewhere and he doesn't know why he's there. You may recall that I told you that, I think I told some people, I think I said it in the last class, that we were planning a family vacation abroad. And it was a really fun vacation. And everything went well, thank God. And then the last morning, when we were driving to the airport to drop the car off and to get on the plane back to Israel, there was suddenly this strange light. It was red and yellow at the same time. This I've never seen in my life. What does red and yellow mean? In Israel, we have something that's like, a strobing yellow. We have a strobing green. I think we even have, what do we have? Yellow and green together? I don't remember, something like that. I can't even remember how it works. But I've never seen anything like this. It was a strobing red and yellow light. And it was a hard turn. It was like almost getting onto a highway with the light. But the light wasn't working, so it was like, how do I do this? I was a little concerned, but okay. But I don't know why. It suddenly hit me, wait a minute, this light doesn't mean I should move into the intersection. It means stay back. I don't know why I suddenly thought that. And so I put the car in reverse. And so it was a really big car because it had the whole family in it. It's more like a truck. Well, it was a big van. And I couldn't see even backwards, but I also wasn't paying attention. And it was pretty early in the morning, and I didn't think anybody was on the road even. The highway had some cars, but where I came from, the side road didn't seem to have any traffic. So I think in the back of my head, I was like, I'm the only one on the road. And so I moved the stick into reverse, and it just started going in reverse. And then I hear this scream from my children in the back, and I know what's going to happen next. And it happens, and I hear the thud, right? I'm like, we have 2.5 hours, and we wouldn't have been here anymore. Now I have to take care of this. Okay, so I got out. I'm looking at the other guy's car, and nothing happened. Thank God. I didn't get a chance really to hit him. Like, it was very, very slow, and the distance was nothing. He was right behind me, so I didn't get up to any speed. Nothing happened. Nothing happened to his car. Nothing happened to the van. Everything seemed fine. This guy comes out, and he's not. We were in Austria. He wasn't German. He wasn't Austrian. He looked at me like he was Arab, but I couldn't tell. But he spoke German, and his English wasn't so great. But we communicated, and I saw that he was like stressed beyond belief. And I only wanted to get out of there. So I tried haggling with him. I told him, look, nothing happened. But in the off chance that you find anything, here's 100 euros, and we'll part as friends. But he didn't want to have any of it. He says, no, you can't go anywhere. I have to call the police. They have to file something, this, that, the other thing. Okay. So I'm stuck. Can't get rid of this guy. Nothing happened, but I can't get rid of him. So I'm wondering, like I usually do, what in the world does Hashem want? What in the world does God want from me here? Couldn't figure it out. And in the meantime, he's like taking a picture of my license, I'm taking a picture of the cars, and it's fine, everything's like this and like that. Ten minutes go by, and he decides to call somebody. So he calls somebody, he's on the phone with them, and he gets off the phone, and he looks a little bit more calm. So I say to him something very interesting. It came to my mind. Actually, what happened was that I saw on his phone, I realized at some point that he wasn't Arab. I realized he was Hindi. He was Hindu. I saw on his phone like his screensaver, like the picture on his phone was, what's the name of that goddess? The one that has a lot of arms and legs, and has got a lot of, I don't remember what she's called. Anyway, so I say to him, I come up to him, and I hold him by, like it's my friend. I grab him by the shoulder, and I tell him, you know why this happened? So he looks at me, he says, why? Why did this happen? He says, because God wanted us to meet. He wanted us to talk to each other. He wanted us to get to know each other a little. He wants you to have my phone number. He wants me to have your phone number. He burst out laughing. Like, it was just like all the tension that he had, like, was swept away. I was amazed. What are people looking for? I mean, here's a person who definitely has belief in God, maybe idolatrous to some extent, but he definitely believes in God. And in his day-to-day life, he doesn't know what God wants from him. He has no idea. And the moment that you come and you say, do you know why we're here? Because God wants us to be together. And suddenly it's like a veil is taken off of reality. And suddenly there's this calm that comes in. There's purpose. There's meaning to what's going on. It's not by mistake. It's not just chaotic. It's not meaningless. It's an amazing moment. So a lot of times we go through life and we forget that there's meaning behind what's happening. When do we search for meaning? When something negative happens. We can't figure it out. So we search when we grope for meaning. But that's only because the situation is forcing our minds, which can't deal with chaos, to search for some kind of rationale in what's going on. But the truth is, it's always that way. There's always meaning behind what's happening. There's always God guiding the world and making us go here and go there and do this and do that. Except that we don't know what it is. We don't know what the meaning is. So says Mendel Bohrer, and listen, this is an amazing insight. He says, in the time of the temple, this is why the whole world, if it knew this, if it realized this, it would run to us to say, why aren't you building the temple yet? The reason clearly came from above, just like with a prophet whom God commanded from above. Meaning you saw the reasons for why things were as they were, just like a prophet. Even if you weren't a prophet. Did it happen every single moment of your life? Maybe not. But it would happen at least once or twice at important junctures in life. And you would be accompanied your entire time on earth with a knowledge, with the realization that there's meaning behind what's happening. That's what the temple gave. It made everybody at some level a prophet. A prophet not in the sense of discovering the future. A prophet in the sense of being able to understand the reasons, the causes behind what's happening right now at this moment. And he gives an example. Jeremiah is told by God, go and call upon Jerusalem, and the like. Why was it this way? Because the Supernal Mother was not in exile, and from it originated the sons. The Supernal Mother is another way in Jewish mysticism of saying the root cause of things. The mother is the root cause. I'll give you an example of what it means. One of the problems that married men have is that they don't listen to their wives. Why don't they listen to their wives? Because they know better. They do. They really do. They analyze things rationally. They analyze things in the right way. And they come to a certain conclusion. And then their wife says the opposite. And so who are they going to listen to? They're going to listen to themselves because they've analyzed things rationally. But that's a big mistake that married men make. And by the way, it's a big mistake that people make with their mothers. Because when we say that there's a supernal mother, it's what in the time of the ancient Greeks was called the ninth sphere. They called it the ninth sphere. It was the cause of causes. That's what they called it. In Kabbalah, it's called the world of creation. In the Zohar, it's called Kursaya, the world of the chair. There's many names. But it all leads to the same place. It says there's a root cause to everything. There's the prime mover. There's something that gets everything in motion. You have to check this once, what the connection between motion and mother is in English. They're probably related. The mother sets things in motion. When you say Mother Nature, what do you mean? You mean the root cause of everything that happens in nature. When you get married, or when you consider what your mother says, what your wife or your mother is saying is a reflection of that world. It's a reflection of that Mother Nature. It's a reflection of that root cause. And so sometimes it doesn't make sense to you. But it's the real voice you should be listening to and doing what it says. We have a prime example of that in the Torah, that Abraham did not want to throw Ishmael out of his household because he harbored hopes that eventually Ishmael would become, how shall we say it, a compassionate, responsible individual. But Sarah said, he cannot inherit this land with my son, with Isaac. And Abraham would have none of it. So God has to come to Abraham and tell him, Shema b'kola, listen to Sarah. Why? Because she knows something that you don't know. She sees something that you can't see with your rational mind. She sees the root cause. And she was right. She was right. So the Supernal Mother was clear as day in the time of the temple. People understood what the root cause of things is. And again, it may not be that they understood it all the time, but they understood it some of the time. And even understanding it some of the time places you in a state where you realize that your life has meaning and that what goes on in your life has meaning. And you've discovered divine providence, as it's called. But says Reb Mendel, from the temple's destruction and on, the canopy of David is falling. What is the canopy of David? This is this is taken from a verse in Amos 9:11. The canopy of David literally means, well, it has no literal meaning, sorry. Figuratively means divine providence. Divine providence has fallen. What does it mean it's fallen? It's not that God doesn't run the world. Of course he does. But we can't see it. Because the mother is fallen further and further until it is enclosed in the material. And so the causes for Torah and mitzvos have also become material causes. So if in the past it was clear to you that you were going somewhere in order to learn Torah, to do a mitzvah, now you can't see that. What do you see? The bagels and lox. You see the material cause. You see something entirely different. The cause is still there. The mother is still affecting everything. But she's been enclosed in the material. Practically, remember, Mendel Borer, it started out by telling us, was a teacher. And he wouldn't teach in a place where he wasn't offered compensation, a contribution. So the teacher or the preacher needs to make a living. And therefore, must receive from the crowd. And only then can he preach to them and teach them. It's saying that if you don't see the material cause, I'm not talking about the material cause in Greek philosophy, that's something else. Here I'm just saying the material cause, the reason for which you're going to be teaching or preaching. don't go and teach or preach. Why not? A lot of reasons. The main reason is that you won't be heard. If there's a cause, there will be an effect. The effect is not supposed to be, as we'll see in a moment, getting paid. The effect of teaching, of doing a mitzvah, is the mitzvah. So if I'm a teacher and I'm invited to speak somewhere, but they don't want to pay for it, so I know that though I may say important things, they won't be heard. It could be even worse. I could say important things, and those things are a rectification. They teach people something that they didn't know. They've been doing something the wrong way. But now I taught them how to do it the right way, but they don't listen to it. And because they don't listen to it, it's called Lifnei Iver Lo Titen Michshol, that I've placed a stumbling block in front of them. Why a stumbling block? Because now, in the heavens they say, but they were taught the right way. Why didn't they listen? So, if there's no material cause behind teaching, he says, don't go. Because it could actually become, instead of aiding the people that you're teaching, you could actually hurt them. Okay. That's what he says about this. Nonetheless, he says, it is written, release who shall release the mother. Implying, right? There's the mother is the cause. The chicks and the eggs are the Torah and mitzvos that come out of your actions. Implying that one should not dwell on the reason. Why does the Torah instruct us to send the mother bird away? Figuratively, in deciphering the symbol, what it means is you shouldn't dwell on the cause. In other words, making one's living should not be the main objective. The cause is not the objective. You need to send it away. Sending it away says, let's give an example. I'm invited to speak somewhere. And they say, we'll pay you X amount. I finish giving the lecture. They come up to me, they're very nice, and they say, look, here's what we agreed on. Or they say, we don't have what we agreed on. In any case, instead of giving me X, they give me X divided by 2. What should be my response? Very nice. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Why? Because that's called releasing the mother. That's saying I didn't really do it for the cause. The cause was to make a living. That's why I was here. I still need to make a living. But I don't have to nitpick on whether this will fulfill my cause. Why? Because the cause is not the important part. The important part is that I taught. The important part is that I did the mitzvah. Another way, remember our lax and bagels on Sunday morning? So you wake up and you get there and you daven and you're expecting the lax and bagels to be served. And the rabbi says, I'm sorry, the catering didn't make it this morning, so we only have some leftover chont from yesterday. Okay, fine. Leftover chont is fine too. Because the point is not the lax and bagels. The point is the davening and the mitzvah, the learning that you did afterwards. It's just that there needed to be a cause to get you there. We'll get more into this in a moment. So don't dwell on the mother too much. You have to release her. For truly, The main objective is not the mother bird. The main objective is not the cause that brought me to do what the good deed that I did. Rather, the purpose was that the need for making a living would facilitate, and the sons you shall take for yourself, the Torah and mitzvos that you performed, that will be your reward. Meaning that it will cause the rabbi to teach and preach to the people. Okay. So this is a very interesting reinterpretation of this mitzvah that takes us into the realm of how a person should conduct themselves and how one should look at the motivations for what one does. One of the biggest problems that especially Jews have is, what is my motivation? So let's ask it this way. The guy who wakes up on Sunday morning and goes to daven and to hear a class for lax and bagels, is he a righteous man? It's a good question. You go to a lecture in the local Chabad house on campus, and you hear all these new things about Torah and Shabbos and this and that. Or you go to Friday night dinner there, and it's free, and it's this and it's that. But you went for the socializing, you went for the food, you went for the free pizza on the weeknight. Is that a mitzvah what you did? Does it even mean anything? The rabbi who puts this together, who entices people, as it were, to come by offering them free food, how should he look at the people who are coming? What's his attitude towards them? They're so low that the only thing that they'll come for is when you feed them? There's no other way, because it's very hard to look at these people as righteous, as people who are doing things from the right place. It seems that they're doing you a favor at most. They're really after their stomachs. So how do we look at ourselves? How do we see these things in us? These motivations? How should we understand them? Well, what Mendel Bohr just did is he taught us a lesson in how to see ourselves. He says, really, this is the same motivation as the motivation of a prophet, except that the mother has fallen, the canopy of David has fallen deeper and deeper into the material world. And so, if the only thing that moves you is pizza or bagels and lox, it's not because you don't value the spiritual. It's not because you don't value altruism. It's not because of that. If you're a Jew, you do value it. But since the destruction of the temple, the mother has been cast down into the material world. And so the only reasons that move us, well, not the only ones, but ones that really start and get things in motion, are these lower reasons. But there's no escaping it. It's just how the world is right now. It doesn't mean that you're a coarse individual. It doesn't mean that you have no spiritual sensibility. It just means that this is how the world is run. Right now, this is how the world works. Of course, there's always individuals who see beyond this. But We can't always see beyond it. Even those individuals that do see beyond it can't always understand the spiritual reason behind things. And so in the end, if there's something that you need to do physically, you just need to do it. There's no getting around it. So the sages have this interesting statement. They say, "Ha'ichrach lo yeguneh." That something that a person needs to do will never be scorned in heaven. Meaning, if you did this because you needed to make a livelihood, and because of that you became a rabbi, and you got this position, and so on, and because of that you taught Torah, because you needed to make a living, that's all. It's not scorned. You're not laughed at in heaven. It's just the pain of the general situation of the world. The things seem so material. And it's hard to see the spiritual beyond and through the material. It's just how the world is. So in that sense, Mendel Borer is teaching us to look at ourselves favorably and to look at others favorably and to understand that the reason why people are motivated by these material causes is because the temple was destroyed and because there's no consciousness of divine providence that doesn't pass for most people through the material needs. It's just how it is. There's a whole question about the coming to the land of Israel in the 19th and 20th centuries. Why did Jews come here? They came here to escape. Most of them came here to escape. Escape what? The bloodbath of Europe. The bloodbath of the Arab countries. Some people also felt the spiritual holiness, and they came because it's the Holy Land, and so on and so forth. But for most people, it was a refuge. Nobody was here, or relatively no one was here. And conditions were very difficult, but they were still better than the conditions in Europe or in the Arab countries. So they came out of necessity. Does that mean that there's no spiritual value to Jews coming here and setting up a Jewish settlement in the land of Israel? In the Holy Land? No. Of course there's meaning to it. The fact that the motivation has to come from such a low place is because that's how the world is right now. It's very hard to find people motivated by spiritual reasons. Our duty is to explain to people that even if you think the cause that made you do this is some material cause, some psychological cause, know that in the end, it's really a spiritual cause. It's just that the world is in such a low state that the only way you could have felt God's calling was through these physical, material necessities. But it's God. It's divine providence. There's nothing else here. That's what it is. So that's the first thing we learned from Mendel Borer. And it really, I think, opens up a whole new way of looking at ourselves and judging ourselves favorably and others, and understanding that even if people are looking to make a living, and that seems to be their only concern, behind it is divine providence. Behind it are very high levels of spirituality. That right now, this is how they appear in the world. This is their only vehicle. So that's the first insight. The second insight is more complex. The second insight requires us to read the verse very carefully. We said that the correct translation is, release you shall release. There's a question of why does it repeat it twice? Why repeat? I mean, you should just say release the mother bird or make her fly her away, and that's it. Why shalech teshalach? Why this idea of releasing her twice? So Ilana just asked the question, but I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand what he wrote. If there is a shgacha pratis, meaning there's divine providence, and it goes down to the level of the individual. So the question here is, why ascribe it to oneself? I don't understand why you're saying ascribe it to oneself. I wouldn't ascribe it to oneself. I'm saying that God is motivating me. Even though it looks like I'm being motivated by material needs, God is behind these material needs. That's the idea. It's like saying that I'm living with divine providence, even though it doesn't look that way. I'm living with divine providence. Because I'm connected to God. So why judge myself favorably? Because I'm not just, even though it seems to me that I'm only motivated by my material needs, what Mendel Bohr is teaching me is that behind these material needs is really a spiritual need. So don't look at only the external side of things. Understand that there's an internal side to everything that you're doing. And that it's God who's motivating you, even if it looks to you like you're being motivated by your own needs. Okay? Again, when is this so? When you do a mitzvah. He's not saying that you should see it this way necessarily when you go to, I don't know, when you go on vacation. Okay? I don't know if there's a big mitzvah in that. Maybe for the parents who take their kids on vacation, there's a mitzvah because it's really hard work. We took a vacation for a week, and I hadn't worked so hard in a long time. But so maybe there's a mitzvah for me in there. But not everything that we do is a mitzvah. I'm saying that if I did a mitzvah, but it looks to me like my motivation was something material, I should still judge myself favorably, saying that my motivation was not only the material need. Behind it, encapsulated within it, is a spiritual motivation, divine providence. Okay. Right, so God is enticing me to do something lo lishma, so that I would eventually come to do it lishma. Maybe I won't come to do it lishma. Maybe I won't. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But what you said in the beginning, he's enticing me to do something not for its own sake. It's for the sake of something material. And that's okay. That's how the world is right now. Okay. Now, the problem is with this whole depiction. And for this, again, to solve this conundrum, we're going to have to really pay attention to the words release, you shall release. Why it repeats twice. What did we just do? We recaptured the mother. We recaptured the reason. It's a little hard to see in the beginning. What did he say? He said, don't dwell on the reason. Don't dwell on it, because it's not the purpose. The purpose is really the Torah and mitzvahs that you accomplish. But if I come and say, I want to take the reason for myself. Why? Because I realize that within the reason is hiding a spiritual motivation, divine providence from God. Then what am I doing? I'm recapturing the mother bird. In the beginning, he told me, let go of the reason. Why should I let go of the reason? Because the reason is not the important part. If they didn't pay you what they promised to pay you, don't get uptight about it. No harm done. Because the point was the mitzvah. If you didn't get bagels and lox because it wasn't there, it's okay. Because he didn't really come for the bagels and lox. He really came for the davening and the learning. But when we learn from this that even our motivations have a spiritual core to them. It's just that the spiritual core came down. It falls into the material world. That's actually recapturing the mother bird and saying that the reason does matter. Why? Because the reason inside it has my surprise, which is I'm really spiritual. I'm recapturing the mother. I'm taking the cause and I'm saying the cause inside of itself has a spiritual motivation. And I want that spiritual motivation. Why do I need that spiritual motivation? We said, because otherwise I become a tainted, materially motivated person. And where's my spirituality? Am I really only driven by my material needs? We said no. I need to open up that material cause and discover that really it's a godly reason. Like Ilana said, God enticed me. But it's godliness. It's just concealed. So I actually captured back the mother bird, and I'm using it now for my... But you're not allowed to. That's the question. Are you allowed to or not? Says Rabbi Ginsburg, when you read this carefully, you see that the Torah is implying that you're supposed to capture the mother bird again. Meaning you set it free the first time, then you captured it in order not to feel that you're only material, that you're only materially motivated. You captured the mother bird again, even though you still let it go, but then you capture it. But then you have to re-release it a second time. Why? Because if you don't release it a second time, you might come to think that you really are spiritual. It's a delicate balance. You can't think that God is not with you. A person who thinks that his life does not have divine meaning loses interest in life. You have to realize that there's a spiritual core inside the reasons for what you do. So you have to recapture the bird after you've let it go. But at the same time, you have to release it again, lest you come to the thought that I really am a very spiritually motivated person, and you begin to believe that you're on a very high level. That's not true. God is enticing you. God is with you. He's guiding you. It's not because of your prowess that you understood that this is what you're supposed to do. It's not because of your deep insight and deep spirituality that you chose to do these good things. It's because God is enticing you to do these things. He's taking spiritual reasons and he's clothing them within these material causes. It's not you. If you begin to believe that about yourself, that, the new car that I need, that's because I'm a really spiritual guy. And I know that car is going to be used for so many mitzvos. You're fooling yourself. You can't believe that about yourself. You'll begin to have hubris. You'll begin to have pride in yourself. And that is wrong. So you have to re-release the mother after you've captured it. So this goes very deeply. Again, it needs to be expanded a lot more. We're just giving the basics here. But that this whole way that a person sees themselves is a delicate balance between, on the one hand, coming to terms with the fact that what motivates us are material needs, but then realizing that even our material needs are guided by God, but then not fall into the trap of thinking that because God is guiding us, we're godly. That's not the same thing. We can't yet trust ourselves to say that if I wake up in the morning and I have this deep yearning, deep desire to buy a new house, so that means that God has revealed the spiritual reason for my life now. No, he hasn't. That's me. Why? Because even after I realize that the core of my material needs is spiritual, I also realize, meaning I let go of that cause and say, but that's not me, that's what God does for me. He takes spiritual motivations and he encloses them within the material causes that make me do what I do. And that is one of the most important foundations of a healthy psyche. On the one hand, understanding that our lives have spiritual meaning. On the other hand, not falling into the trap of thinking that we know what that spiritual meaning is, and that we can from now on decide by ourselves what the next step should be. That balance between my life is spiritually motivated, but I'm not motivating myself spiritually yet, is the balance that's needed to, on the one hand, always feel that life is meaningful, and on the other hand, not to fall into a state of too much self-pride and self-confidence and thinking that I already know the mind of God. Okay, if there's any questions, now is a good time. I think you can open, let me see. Yeah, you can open the audio if you want to. Okay, there's some stuff to process here. And I hope that if you liked it, and it seemed a little complex, then you can go back to the channel. There's a channel where all these classes appear. And it usually comes up after 2, 3, 4 days. And then you can watch it again. Yes?
Can I go on stages like do something for like first time 0.25% for a reason, and then like 0.5%, like grade.
I didn't follow.
Is it grade the reason we do things? We do things percentage of, for good and bad, and we'll just try and increase the percentage for good and mute, and when you used to teach have Dalai Lama, it always sounded like it was one or the other.
Always sounded like?
It was one or the other. Either you're doing something for God or you're doing it for yourself. It doesn't ever seem like there was a grey area.
In our mind, it's one after the other. Meaning we have this realization that we can't run away from, which is that we do things for ourselves. But to not lose faith in life, you have to understand that even those things that you're doing for yourself, and they lead to mitzvos, they're motivated spiritually from above. And like we said, it's like releasing the bird and capturing it, releasing it and capturing. You can't have it. It's not. Again, in the what I would call the rational mind, it's not Schrodinger's cat. It's not both captured and free at the same time. In the rational mind, it's either this or that. It's true that in the spiritual mind, it might be like that, like a state of uncertainty, where it's not clear to me whether it's this or that, but I don't think that's a good way to live. I think that the better way to live is to hold on to one thought and then exchange it for the next one. And keep releasing and recapturing the reason. Releasing.
If I was writing a list of my reasons, I could have 5 motivations for doing something.
There's always many motivations, but again, you
Why could some of them be, Havdalah, and some of them be self-serving?
You have to give me an example.
Exactly the same time.
You have to give me an example.
Just say somebody likes running.
Okay.
And it's an addiction, they love running. So they decide they're going to start a running thing, I don't know, some good reason or some cause. They're going to run for a cause. They're going to run so to raise money.
Okay.
But they like running. When they set out on that run, they go for 2 reasons. One is because the money spent going to go to
Right. So how do you think about it? You say, the mitzvah was done. You brought the tzedakah. So why was it running? On the one hand, it's a deep spiritual reason that I'm a spiritual person. I want to do tzedakah. But in this world, the only way that I could be motivated is by running, by enjoying running. That's the one side of it. So there's really a deep spiritual reason. On the other hand, if I begin to say, oh, I'm a very spiritual guy. Look at all the tzedakah I gave. And you ignore the reason. Really, right? So then you have to recapture it. And to recapture it means, but in the end I did it because I like running. And that saves you from the opposite state that you don't want to get into, which is that I'm a really spiritual guy and I do tzedakah because I'm just a spiritual guy. That you don't want to say. Because then you're giving yourself the credit for the mitzvah.
When you put sneakers in the morning and somebody comes in and says, why are you putting your sneakers on? You'll tell them you have 2 reasons in your mind. 2 reasons for going. The one is maybe there's another exactly the same race somewhere else. It's a lot more exciting. Or bigger or longer or something, but nobody, you've got 2 reasons now for setting up, for going out the door.
Mm-hmm. The question is not so much before the act. The question is more after the act. After the act, when you go back and reflect on what happened, then the different reasons become one. Because in the end, it was all tied together.
So can we say when doing Hafna and Havdalah, it should always start with Hafna, about Havdalah, and then go back to Hafna after every...
Well, it depends. I mean, if you can't see the reason, the spiritual reason, so maybe Havdalah comes first. Havdalah, for those who don't know, means separation. Really, what we teach is that separation is seeing the divine in something, seeing the higher purpose in something. So Havdalah is like seeing the higher reason here.
Sometimes that higher reason is your mission, right?
Sometimes the higher reason
is your mission. It's not just you seeing it, like it was your mission.
Right. It always is.
Does that mean always after your mission, after Havdalah comes Hafna again? Because of what you're saying now.
The Achna is so that I don't become full of myself. Saying I already know my mission and I'm already responsible for all the good things that I do. And I could replace God.
Does Hafna, Havdalah, Hafna, and at some point something comes in? But you just go from Hafna, Havdalah, Hafna.
No, here we're just going between these two. I mean, that's why we don't use this language normally. You're right. What you're saying is correct technically. We don't usually use Achnav Dalam Taka to describe this whole statement by Mendel Bohr.
But you can't separate the two because one is Havdalah and one is Hafna.
Okay, but we don't use that language because usually Achnav Dalah, in the end, there's Amtaka, there's sweetening. And here there's no Amtaka in the end.
But I'm saying, according to what you're saying, then we should never wake up This is how good. And then whenever it comes.
Again, it's a very technical discussion. I'm just saying that it's not the nomenclature that you would use because there's no third stage here. There's no third stage that I can see. So it's not related to Achnav Laramtaka. It's just that on the one hand you see it as God motivated me, meaning there's a spiritual core to my motivation. On the other hand, I'm really interested in the material cause. That's all. And that balance is struck between these two. Like many things, balance is usually with two things that have equal weight. Doesn't have to be a third thing.
Thank you. Are we over now, or you still have a minute?
I have a minute. I think so.
Good. Welcome back. Thank you. So I'm just trying to understand. Ilana's questions are very good. I'm trying to understand. I'm going to say this on a very shot level, so that's, I guess, the level I come from. So before, when there was a normal world for the pandemic, we used to have a lot of people in whatever for to eat, and we used to have a lot of single guys. Now, I have to tell you, really, I mean, I would spend days, making all of these things, and they come through, and sometimes I didn't feel the food was eaten. I feel it was vacuumed. It was like filling. I would look at each other, and when's the last time these poor boys had a meal? I don't know. So it is very interesting. It filled this vortex, but I started to get jaded about it, which I think is normal and natural, after a while. And I started saying, they're just coming to slurp up the food, and they put their orders in, they'd start, could you have this, could you have that? And then it's very interesting. A couple of years later, when we no longer could do it, people came and they said, we really miss this Shabbos or whatever, or this, the Chag or whatever it was. And then I'd say, because I got jaded, I'd say, well, you could get food elsewhere too, or whatever, or, you could order out or something like that. And they say, no, you don't understand. I never had an experience like I had there in the sukkah, or like I had there at the table, or whatever. And I started really understanding that it really wasn't about food.
Well, it was and it wasn't.
It was and it wasn't, right? It took me a while to get that I thought I was so important, I guess, making the food. Oh, I was making the food. And it was hard. It was a lot of preparation, and it was expensive. It was a lot of money. But somehow, it was really strange. I mean, that I started to realize that, hey, I was there. I was the object through which something was happening. And I really just had to see myself as that. The object, not the subject.
So for them, let's just, flesh it out here. For the boys coming over to your house, so theoretically they're coming for the food. They are coming for the food. But what they discover later is that there was something spiritual that was motivating the food. But they couldn't see it at the time. I mean, they sort of knew because it's a holiday, it's Shabbos, it's this, it's that. In the back of their minds, they knew there was something spiritual, but they didn't come for that. They came for the food. Now, when you say to them, you came for the food, you didn't come for something spiritual. So what are you doing? It's like not having learned this piece that we just learned from Mendel Bohr. It means taking reality at face value and saying there's nothing spiritual about reality. It is what you see is what you get. That's all there is here. And what Chassidus is trying to teach me is that there are deeper motivations going on all the time, and these deeper motivations are spiritual. Now so I first of all I said this changes the way I look at other people. This needs to change the way that I see other people. I need to see other people as also motivated, whether they know it or not, by spiritual considerations. So that's as far as how I treat others. What about myself? I don't want to put myself down. Now, if all I see in the end is that it was all, just putting food in front of a vacuum cleaner, so I weaken myself because I'm no longer motivated to cook again. I'm no longer motivated to host them. I'm no longer motivated to spend the money on them. That's called weakening my hand, meaning that if I see the world only as the external motivations and causes, then I weaken myself. The only way to strengthen myself is when I realize that my motivations also are in the end spiritual. Even though, again, it could be that, why am I inviting these guys over? Just because I feel bad for them. I don't know. Just because I want everybody to say they host people. Just because I don't want to be alone. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. Okay, those are material needs. They're real. They're there. But you have to recapture the mother bird. You have to come and say, within these motivations that are so material, there's hiding something spiritual. And I myself have to uncover that. I have to work hard to find out what that is. But the moment that I allow that, then I already feel that God is with me. Because that's what it means. What does it mean that God is with me? What do I mean by that? Well, the first thing I mean is that my life has meaning. That's the first thing. That's the first sign that God is with me. If I feel that my life has meaning. If I don't feel that my life has meaning, God is not with me. Okay. So it's very good examples and great questions. And hope to see everybody next week, God willing. So thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Hyde.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Braha. Great example.
Yeah, a lot of that was amazing. A lot of speaks to such a spiritual. You really